I'm Chris Olshan, the CEO of the Luxury Marketing Council. Since 1994, having served more than 1,000 luxury brands, 5,000 CEOs and CMOs in more than 60 cities worldwide. Today, I have the pleasure to be with Jeffrey Lefrancois, the Executive Director of Meatpacking Business Improvement District. Jeffrey, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to see you too, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Where'd you grow up and where'd you go to school?
Sure. I grew up in southeastern Connecticut, what I like to call the New England side of Connecticut. Eastern side of the state identifies with Boston, Red Sox, all that kind of good stuff. Western side of the state, tri-state area, Yankees, New York. I found my way to New York City for college. I went to Pace University in Lower Manhattan. And I haven't really looked back in terms of other than going to visit family. And yes, I'm still a Red Sox fan, but I found my way into the city and haven't really left. And that was many years ago, and here we are now.
Okay, so when you finished college at Pace, what was your first job out of school?
Sure, my background is actually government and politics. I was actually a theater kid growing up, and on my way to college, I was thinking, okay, do I do theater or politics? And then many people suggested, well, you can kill two birds with one stone by doing politics, Jeffrey, because that's a form of theater. And so I studied political science, very civically involved still to this day, and sort of found my way. After college, I worked for a number of elected officials on the west side of Manhattan. I was a deputy chief of staff for an assembly member. I was chief of staff for an incoming council member, Corey Johnson, who's now the speaker of the city council. And then in that time, I was negotiating what was this nascent idea of the Meatpacking Business Improvement District, because bids are actually created by the city. And so I was on the council side of the negotiation of having this thing come into existence. And then a couple of years later, I found my way into a job here at the bid. And 2 years ago, I took over as executive director.
Why don't we talk a little bit about business improvement districts and
Sure.
specifically the meatpacking one, and explain to the audience kind of what the bid does, how it works, and how that applies to the district of meatpacking.
Sure. So BID, Business Improvement District, there's 76 of them across the city of New York. All 5 boroughs have bids. They're actually all around the country and all around the world, in cities big and small, actually. And they provide very particular things to the neighborhood they're meant to provide for. So in the Meatpacking District, we provide sanitation services, public space management, landscaping, and public safety. And we have significant marketing and programming profiles as well for the neighborhood. We are, the cheerleader of the district, if you will, both for, we like to be a neighborhood for New Yorkers, but we also lean into figuring out how tourists can spend their dollars here, want to come here and be happy. So our lens is very meatpacking specific. If you're running the Times Square bid, that's very Times Square specific. If you're running Bay Ridge in Brooklyn, that's going to be very Bay Ridge specific. And so what we do is an exact reflection of our constituency. So the businesses that make up our ground floor and upstairs tenancy, our property owners, we have a robust residential population, as well as really being buttressed by residential neighborhoods in the Village and Chelsea. And so we use all of that to inform, our offering to the public. But at the end of the day, our job is to make this place sparkle in a way that feels appropriate for meatpacking, because people like that grit.
I was going to say, it's funny when you were just saying this, what kind of registered and I thought about is, as you said, the Village, meatpacking, and Chelsea. I kind of stopped and was like, as a New Yorker, it's tone deaf to me to hear Chelsea, because part of what makes New York, New York is the fact that that's Hell's Kitchen. And it's like, meatpacking has been meatpacking for a long time. The Village has been the Village for a long time.
Yep.
Hell's Kitchen has been Hell's Kitchen for over 100 years. And all of a sudden it's now Chelsea. And it's like, no, that doesn't sound like New York anymore. I'm getting off on a tangent, but I like that to your point about the grit. It's kind of like packing has a feel. There's cobblestone streets. There's something about it that just makes you feel like it's old New York. And I like that you guys have not steered away from that to kind of gentrify the area, but keep part of what made it, you know, the businesses have gotten nicer, the streets have gotten safer, but it still feels like New York.
Well, and that's key. Everybody always says, as an organization, what's your best asset? We have no better asset than the built neighborhood. You mentioned the cobblestone streets. We have sort of classic late 19th century, early 20th century architecture here that's been well preserved. That's also allowed for new development in the neighborhood as well. You know, we have what used to be wide market streets are now beautiful public plazas, which is, you know, good public space is good for business. It's good for the quality of life of New Yorkers. And when those two things are in line, you have an ideal environment for both tourism to thrive, and then at the end of the day for business to succeed, which as a business improvement district, my goal is to make this the best possible place in town to do business. And I say that not just as somebody who talks to business owners day in and day out, employees, but also I want to make sure that the person transacting, the person spending the money, is having a phenomenal experience inside and out, because that helps the city look good. And I love making New York City look and feel really good.
All right, talk to me a little bit about kind of the customer, both as the business owner, property owner / resident, and then the customer is in the tourist, the New Yorker that doesn't live in the area. You know, one of the big discussions that goes back probably 10 years now is the idea of the boomers and the millennials, and, you know, the shift in how customers spend and how they behave based upon age and demographic. Is that true for meatpacking, that you're seeing that kind of divide from one generation to the next, or is it less of a generational split and more of just the kind of changing of the times, emergence into technology? I mean, in certain areas they've improved, but they haven't really shifted. And then there are other areas where it's like, okay, you can tell the millennials had their hand on this because this area wouldn't look this way if it was the boomers doing it.
Correct. And I mean, look, our history is distinct. And everybody has particular memories that they associate with the meatpacking district, but we have always one-upped that memory each time. So you may have been a club kid of the late 90s and early 2000s, and today you have a family. You probably have more money to spend, maybe some disposable income. If you came back
where the club's open.
Exactly. What I want is that person to come back to the neighborhood. We call them the comeback kid consumer, because they're probably the exact kind of person who's here today realizing they want to visit the Whitney Museum for some art in the afternoon. They want to have lunch. They want to do some shopping at some really nice stores and do it in a neighborhood that's utterly New York, that feels good to be in because it's removed from the hustle and bustle of Midtown, and sort of enjoy the fact that they have distinct memories of stumbling out of a club at 4 a.m. on Gansevoort Street or Little West 12th Street in the day, and now they're having a lovely lunch. They're able to go and buy some really nice stuff, get a world-class art museum visit, Chelsea Market, the whole nine. So that's a distinct consumer for us, and I think it's a pretty significant consumer for us, especially as it relates to the tri-state area or like the New Yorker, is that comeback moment of realizing what meatpacking was, and then what it is now is actually a place of grown up, of evolution in a way that you're finding you kind of really like it. We still have a nightlife scene, and I really hope we have a nightlife scene sort of post-COVID, but our day life has transformed considerably. And that's a critical component to who our consumer is.
Yep. In fact, it's funny you talk about the you know comeback club kids,
Uh-huh.
and I kind of stop and think, and I remember the last time I was downtown. This is going back to 2019 pre-COVID, but I remember the last time I was in the meatpacking district. I played a little game called "Was That Here at 4 a.m. 20 years ago?" because I don't totally remember if that store was there or if it was something completely different. It's a little
Yeah.
bit of a blur.
Yeah. Everybody has that. A couple of years ago, we were producing an event and I had to be in the neighborhood at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning on a Friday morning or something. And I got a cab here to go. I was going to the flower district, and the cabbie says to me, "So are you starting your morning or ending your night?" It was 5 o'clock in the morning. And I laughed, and it made me really happy because the question was spot on. There's few neighborhoods in the city you could ask that question, and the answer could appropriately be either I'm starting or I'm ending. Or both. Yeah, I could be going to the office after a night on the town too.
I did that once or twice and regretting it every time. But
yes, that we've all been there for that one. But there's a real that moment that's happening here. And from the tourism perspective, look, I think I've been describing a lot of things as like the tablecloth got pulled out from under us, and a lot of stuff came with it, actually, unfortunately.
It was a magic trick.
Yeah, exactly. It exposed a number of things, including that people didn't realize how much this town really relied on tourism dollars, day trippers, weekenders, and then in particular international tourism. And then the business traveling set also was a significant component. After that, there was the realization of a lot of New Yorkers having second homes and spending more time in their second homes over the past 8 months than they ever had before. And the shift in base of consumer and how that played out, I think it was unfortunate because people had to learn it the hard way. But having learned from that, they're reconnecting with, in the meatpacking anyway, they're figuring out how to better connect with the village, how better to connect with Union Square and Chelsea and stuff like that, and Hell's Kitchen, and finding where people stayed, right? In Tribeca, in Soho, in the Upper West Side, and how that's played out and how they can tap into that consumer better to ensure that sort of consistency of customer. With, as tourism increases again, that obviously being a critical part of the build. But everybody's figuring out how to double down on the New Yorker right now. And I don't think there's a perfect playbook for it. I think it's part of the fun of New York is that there's so many of us and everybody has different likes, but how do you find a way to make sure that those that are coming through for the visit are having a great time no matter what and come back again? That's always key. I want the return each time.
Yep. Well, and it's funny you talk about tourism and business travel and kind of split that from the actual New Yorker, because one of the things that I've kind of said since, I would say probably since Giuliani was getting out of office, is I feel like the city somewhat shifted. I mean, especially after 9/11. It went from kind of New York was for New Yorkers and everybody else came to experience the New Yorkers' New York. It was no longer New Yorkers' New York. It was New York for the tourists, for the travelers. And if you lived here, it was kind of like, you're still a New Yorker, but keep it quiet because that's not what we're about anymore. We're now a tourist destination. And I almost feel like this year was that total turn it on its head, shake up, bring it back to it's about your local connections, your local people, the people that are New York strong, that it's their hometown.
Yep.
Because they're the ones that are going to be there through thick or thin, and everybody else, it's like, well, tourism is nice, but until tourism picks up, it's the people in the district, it's the people in the city that are the ones that are going to shop and spend and keep this place afloat.
Absolutely. And look, I have many friends who say, I don't know how you could live here, Jeffrey. I love coming for the weekend, but I can't live here. And not everybody can live here. And the city, a lot of people left during the pandemic, and that's okay. Cities have a natural ebb and flow. Sometimes it sucks because a lot of population is good for business, but there's a natural change that takes place in cities, and we're seeing that play out right now. The bones of New York are very strong. We consistently come back, and we come back stronger every single time. You can centuries long list of issues we have overcome, and always, not just a reinvention, but just a complete recreation in a sense. And we've seen that happen here. As a neighborhood, the changes that have taken place, it hasn't been easy, but the willingness to do it because you got to do it right now. It's how we're making stuff happen, and that's what we're going to keep doing.
This is one of those questions that's an absolutely loaded question. It's the only loaded question of the interview, and it's only been loaded since March. Normally, my question is, what's on the horizon for the next 12 months? Because everybody plans a year or two in advance. At this point, I don't think anybody can properly plan more than a day or two in advance without having things change up. But as a hypothetical we won't hold you to, what is the plan for the next 12 to 18 months, assuming the world doesn't throw another wrench in everybody's plans?
Yeah, I think the most consistent thing for me has been knowing I can have a cup of coffee in the morning and a glass of wine at night has been my key consistency. Though some mornings you wake up and you feel like you want a shot of vodka, but
I was gonna say, the fact that you can make it till night before the glass of wine.
Yeah, that is true. Not always. Look, at the end of the day, we're an economic development organization, and what matters is driving foot traffic and helping people feel safe in doing so. The last thing I want to plan is another series of months of only digital programming. I know you feel the same way, Chris, because at Raising
live doing this right now.
Correct. But we have to do it. So what we learned, though, is that if we're going to go digital and how we're going to go digital, or whatever we're going to do in person, has to think about what it's going to be in an even greater way. People are saturated. They're not going to have the patience of sort of digital programming 101 for a neighborhood the way they did back in March and April. And so what can we do differently this time to up the game to make sure that people who can't necessarily visit the meatpacking on a regular basis are thinking of it, having those meatpacking moments to make sure that when they do feel safe to come back, to visit again, they're happy to do so and they're excited to do so. We are in regular communication with all of our retailers. We have a significant hospitality scene here, and how we can best showcase that. It's fun to be in the papers as a trendsetter, but at the same time, as you point out, nobody wants to be the one saying what they think is going to happen. Because, I think that it's a time when we'd all be eager and excited to be doing something. It's the holidays where, that's coming up, and it's going to be different this year. But what we are leaning into is that it's going to be different, but we need to make sure we're at our best so that way we don't experience the worst. And I think that, we have a willingness of the consumer, of the business to make sure that they're operating top-notch, tight-knit teams, make sure that people have a great experience so that they do come back, they do feel safe here. And that's it for me. I mean, I think that that's not going to go away. You and I don't have to have a mask on right now because we're computer to computer. But I was at Pastis for lunch today and saw 3 people and everybody, mask up to run around and chat, and like there's a comfortableness to it because we're used to it. I think that's okay. And I think knowing that that's not going to go away for a little while is an important way to know that it's not going to be short, but we're definitely going to get there. And that's our MO. Look, like I said earlier, we have really sturdy bones in this city and in this neighborhood. We have a great backbone. We have a great retail landscape led by some incredibly powerful and smart brands at top tier luxury. And then what I like to call introductory luxury also, which I think is one of the things I love. I talked about the consumer. We have what I refer to as the aspirational consumer here too. The person who doesn't live a luxury lifestyle, but wants to save up for the bag, wants to save up for the jeans, wants to save up for the shoes, and they come to meatpacking to have that luxury experience. And we love that customer just as much as the one who's here every month, filling out the closet.
Sure.
So it's a full spectrum for us. And we don't let off the gas in times like this. It's actually, for us, it's the worst possible time to let off the gas. So we're full speed ahead as best we can.
this year has just been a nonstop 24-hour sprint, and I think everybody is getting to the point of being burned out. So with that as the preface, what do you do to chill out and decompress outside of work and kind of recenter yourself normally, and especially this year, given that everything is kind of all merged into one blended blob of just disastrous goo that you can't ever escape? How do you kind of get that reprise from the insanity?
Yep. My previous escape pre-COVID was I was an avid potter, and that was Monday nights and a half a day on the weekend consistently. There was no meetings scheduled at after 8 o'clock on a Monday. Nothing ever got in the way of that class, and then my studio time. And that shut down and has only slowly begun to reopen. So I'm figuring out if and when I'll be able to go back. That was always a nice escape. I'm a person with a tendency to be excited and move things quickly. In pottery, you have to slow down. You can't skip steps. And that was always sort of a methodical therapy for me in that regard. Away from that, I mean, I've always been a big cook in the kitchen. The problem is I can't have 20 people over for a cocktail party. So my partner's getting annoyed because he's like, I'm not eating these leftovers again this week, Jeffrey. Like, we have to have something new.
I get that. I cook as well, and it's like I don't know how to cook small dishes. So
I mean, Chris, that's no fun either. Come on.
Leftovers.
Exactly. Yep. And then I have been. I've become more of an urban cyclist. I've got my city bike membership. I'm going around town visiting friends in their neighborhood at particular parks. I bike to work now. So that's a nice, we'll see how I last through the winter. But it's tough right now. That I love the city. I'm not going anywhere, but the things that it's harder to be here because the things that we love that make it great aren't readily accessible. I've got to plan my trip to the Whitney. I've got to plan my trip to the Metropolitan. We can't have a Broadway date right now. Those are the things where you feel so good about this town and having them that we'll get it back.
The last question for you.
Sure.
What is your personal definition of luxury?
A quality in design and integrity of brand. I bought my first luxury wallet in high school, and I always go back to that brand as a first place to think of and look to this day. I'm not a regular luxury shopper, but when I do, I have a look for that. But it's, I guess, okay, an A to Z experience, whether you're purchasing something, having a dinner, or that trip, everything has to be thought through. Every I dotted, T crossed. This is a rambling definition, but I think that in today's day and age, it's about the experience and the quality and integrity of the brand.
Okay, I like that. And again, I think it fits perfectly because meatpacking is a totally different experience from the rest of New York. It's done in a quality way. Everything is thought about, and I think it fits not only as a personal definition, but as the brand you work for. So,
yeah,
great answer. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here. Thank you for all you're doing.
Of course. And thank you all for the investment of your time and the luxury of your company. Again, I'm Chris Olshan, the CEO of the Luxury Marketing Council, today with Jeffrey Lefrancois, Executive Director of the Meatpacking Business Improvement District. And we'll see you next time.